Tom Cotton, Congressman Devin Nunes, and former Director of National Intelligence Rick Grenell. One topic they're sure to discuss is President Trump's battle with COVID-19.
Stocks took a plunge after news of his diagnosis broke, but what can we expect when the market reopens tomorrow? Go ahead, Jed.
Let's ask Sunday Morning Futures host Maria Bartiromo. Maria, welcome as always. So what can we expect?
Hi, guys. Great to see you this morning. Well, look, the market sold off when the news first hit that the president and first lady have been diagnosed. But, you know, at this point, it's what do we know about the president? I mean, that's really going to dictate markets. People do not want to have the uncertainty of when the president will get back to strong health. And so without real news and confirmation that he is doing well, he is getting through this, I think you're going to have a choppy market because markets do not like uncertainty, and they certainly do not want to see the president weakened. Look, I think the reason that the market is where it is in terms of very close to record highs is because the market largely expects the president to be reelected, and the market largely expects that we will see his policies continue, and that is low taxes, deregulation, opening up the energy spigot, all of the important points to his economic policy. That is why this market is trading the way it is.
Right.
It would not be trading this way if you expected that we would see $4 trillion in tax increases from Joe Biden. So I think the president's health and anything that happens is certainly going to impact the markets, for sure.
Well, to be clear, though, then, Maria, I agree with you. Who knows what kind of uncertainty we're in store for tomorrow morning. But if the market does go down, do you see that then as an indication the market is seeing a potential increase in Joe Biden's election to president?
Well, it depends. You know, it's all about policy. And the policies right now of this president have been able to move the needle on economic growth. Look, we had a sharp contraction because of COVID. But before COVID arrived, you were talking about 3.5% unemployment, the lowest unemployment many groups had ever seen, such as African-American community. So I think that the policies are going to be really what markets focus on. We don't know. We need more information about the president's health. So, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say, look, the market's going to go up tomorrow. We really need information about the president. I think it was very important that he put out that video, that tweet. It's very important to hear some of the senators and congressmen who have spoken with him to ensure that people get a sense of confidence that he is, in fact, getting through this. It is going to impact markets. There's no doubt in my mind.
No doubt. Maria Bartiromo, you have a great lineup, as always, on your show. And according to my mobile clock here, your show starts in 11 minutes, Maria. So get to work. People will be watching.
Yeah, Pete, let me just say that we will have breaking news because the Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, briefed the Gang of Eight about that intelligence that he declassified last week, which, of course, was that it was Hillary Clinton's plan to take down President Trump during the 2016 election. I'm going to have breaking news on that. He briefed Kevin McCarthy and Devin Nunes. They're both with me this morning, and we'll get more into it. I am told that that was just a small portion of what Ratcliffe has in terms of needing to declassify more information. That report that Hillary Clinton approved a plan to tie Donald Trump to Russia and Putin. We'll have more on that coming up.
Very interesting. Maria, thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, coming up, the Trump campaign shifting strategy as COVID keeps the president off the campaign trail for now. How will this impact their plan?
Is launching Operation MAGA in an attempt to keep their momentum. Joining me now with more is Trump campaign director of press communications, Aaron Perini. Aaron, thanks for being here with us this morning. Let's talk about adjustments. Obviously, the campaign was relying heavily on in-person events, rallies. What now? How does the campaign move forward with President Trump recuperating from coronavirus?
Yes, good morning. Thank you for having me, Will. As you mentioned, we are launching Operation MAGA, which will be a full-force effort by this campaign to make sure while President Trump is getting the care he needs for the coronavirus, the way he's had America's back for the last 4 years, we're going to have his. You will see a big virtual rally tomorrow night with information to come on that. And the vice president's debate on Wednesday, we will have the first family doing in-person campaign stops, and the Army for Trump will continue our aggressive massive work on behalf of this president and his administration. We will continue to safely knock doors, talk to voters, make phone calls, have in-person events safely, and make sure that we get the facts out there about what's at stake. Listen, Democrats want to take this country in a dangerous direction towards socialism. We cannot let that happen. With 30 days to go, the Army for Trump is standing up for President Trump.
I want to get to a couple other things with you, Aaron, if I can here, but really quickly, you just mentioned some in-person events will go forward. Nobody's pointed to rallies as a point where these infections with President Trump and those around him got sick. But is there any adjustments on your end to the rallies or to the in-person events at all after the latest news?
We have always taken the health and safety of the American people incredibly seriously on this campaign. While you've seen violent riots and protests in the streets with no safety precautions, we have always implemented safety precautions and will continue to do so. That includes temperature checks, that includes masks, and that includes hand sanitizer. Listen, for those of us who can't join in person, we always encourage people to join us online for our events. We will continue to pursue health and safety protocols for every individual who wants to come and join us in person.
As you pointed out, the debates are coming up, vice presidential debate this week. There are some adjustments, by the way, to that debate. I believe the candidates are going to stand 12 feet apart instead of 7. What about, let me ask you this, what about the second presidential debate, Aaron? Is there any chance that one goes virtual, or is it scheduled, in your mind, still to go forward as an in-person debate?
As of right now, there have been no conversations regarding a virtual presidential debate. I know President Trump is on the mend. As you've seen from the video of him, he is doing well. He is feeling well. He is getting better. And so we are going to continue to pursue to make sure that we have a safe presidential debate between President Trump and Mr. Biden so that the American people can really see the contrast of ideas. 47 months of success with President Trump at the helm as he's fighting the coronavirus right now versus 47 years of abject failure by Joe Biden. It's a clear contrast.
30 days.
Sure to be a marker of this unprecedented moment in American history. The President of the United States can be seen here displaying tremendous courage on Friday while being transported to Walter Reed Medical Center after both he and First Lady Melania Trump tested positive for coronavirus just one day earlier. The president, who has continued to work from his hospital suite, shared this update on Twitter last night, thanking his doctors and the American people for their continued support.
I came here, wasn't feeling so well. I feel much better now. We're working hard to get me all the way back. I have to be back because we still have to make America great again. We've done an awfully good job of that, but we still have steps to go, and we have to finish that job. And I'll be back. I think I'll be back soon.
And first this morning, prayers and get well soon wishes are pouring in from across the globe this morning following the news of President Trump's coronavirus diagnosis on Thursday night. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who was also hospitalized with this virus earlier this year, tweeted this: "My best wishes to President Trump and the First Lady. Hope they both have a speedy recovery from coronavirus." Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that, like millions of Israelis, he and his wife Sarah are thinking about President Trump and Melania and wish our friends a full and speedy recovery. GOP leader Kevin McCarthy spoke with the president on the phone. He joins me now with an update. Good morning, Congressman. Good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me back on, Maria.
Can you tell us how the president sounded? Congressman, you spoke with him on Friday, correct?
Yeah, he called me Friday night after he got into the hospital. It was late, around 10:30 or so. I could tell he wasn't feeling well, but you could see in the president, and you listened to him, and we had a long conversation. He was worried about those others who had COVID. He was determined to make sure we defeat this virus, and he was so appreciative of the thoughts, the prayers, and the well wishes. But he was still doing work. We were talking about how we could get the Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, to stop playing politics and actually get a COVID relief bill, of how hard he's continuing, even in his own state, that he wanted to make sure he got that to the American public, that the airlines would not be laying people off, that we could put people before politics.
Unbelievable. You know, Nancy Pelosi reacted to the president's coronavirus test, and she said that it was the way he acted was a brazen invitation. You have heard a lot of hate as well online. Your reaction to what you're hearing from the president's critics this morning?
Well, it's rather disgusting, and we've watched the Speaker Pelosi say this before, that we're enemies of the state. This is uncalled for, especially in this time and place. And remember, other nations are watching America. This is the one time that we could unite together. I listened in the president's voice, none of those type of languages to anybody across. The one thing I did hear more of, that how committed he's even doubling down to make sure that he lowers prescription drug prices, that he protects pre-existing conditions. And he is sitting here trying to work with this speaker to get a COVID relief package together. And these are the comments that she makes. It's really unbecoming of that position.
It's unbelievable. Look, Congressman, I want to move on to what you were briefed on this week. This is really important, which is what the Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, declassified this week, a major bombshell that we got when Ratcliffe sent a letter to Lindsey Graham going through the intelligence that he was declassifying. You are a member of the Gang of Eight, which, of course, is a term for a set of 8 leaders within the country and within Congress who are briefed on classified intelligence matters by the executive branch. You were briefed on this information this week, so let's talk about it. So here's the letter to Chairman Graham, and what we learn here is that on September 7th, 2016, U.S. intelligence officials forwarded an investigative referral to FBI Director Jim Comey and Peter Strzok regarding U.S. presidential candidate Hillary Clinton approved a plan concerning U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump and Russian hackers hampering U.S. elections as a means of distracting the public from her use of a private email from her private server. So we see that Hillary Clinton approved a plan to stir up a scandal about Donald Trump in 2016. Congressman, we've been talking about the Russia hoax now for 3.5 years, and now we learned that it was Hillary Clinton's idea. What can you tell us?
Well, when Director Ratcliffe released this, the leaders of Congress wanted to have a meeting because no one in Congress, the House or the Senate, has ever seen this information, even though we have spent all these years investigating. Now, let's walk through, and remember, I must be careful here because some of this is still classified, but let's talk about what's in Ratcliffe's letter. First, we find out in July of 2016, that Russian intelligence had picked up that Hillary Clinton's campaign was going to create a false narrative of Trump and Russia colluding. We now find out in July 26 that the CIA director, in his own notes, briefs the president on this, Brennan, to President Obama. Then just this Wednesday, Comey gets asked a question about this referral that you just talked about for in September. He says it doesn't ring a bell. But I've seen the underlying proof. But inside Ratcliffe's letter, this referral from the CIA was sent to the FBI, to Peter Strzok and to Comey. Now, remember Peter Strzok. He was on Crossfire Hurricane and the Mueller report. And never once did this intelligence show up anywhere in any of those investigations or to Congress or to the Senate. So what we know with all of this, and I know everything that's going on this week, this is the biggest news that didn't get reported. That we find out that there was no collusion between Trump and Russia, that it was created by Hillary Clinton in a campaign in July of 2016, that the CIA director, John Brennan, that the FBI director, Comey, and the President of the United States, Barack Obama, all knew about that and was never brought to Congress. And we have wasted 2 years in this Congress and all the time before wanting to get this information, asking the questions. So another question that comes up, who has withheld this information? Credit to Director Ratcliffe for that transparency of releasing it to the House and Senate. Every member of Congress should read the underlying information behind this. This is really a bombshell of what we have wasted so much time on, that it was created by Hillary Clinton. President Obama knew it, John Brennan knew it, and Comey knew it, and never gave the information to the American public, let alone to Congress or the Senate.
This is a disgrace. For 3.5 years, the whole country was up in arms about this narrative that President Trump colluded with Russia. All of this time, nobody even mentioned this intelligence, that they actually knew that Hillary Clinton was behind it, just like they lied to the FISA court and never told the FISA court that Hillary Clinton and her campaign and the DNC actually paid for the dossier, Congressman.
And remember the dates here, July 2016. During the campaign, they began to create it. The President Obama was briefed by the CIA director in July by those notes what Radcliffe put forward. A memo was sent to Comey and to Peter Strzok, who was part of Crossfire Hurricane and the Mueller report, and never did this intel ever come forward. This is exactly what I warned about. Remember, we talked about this in a commitment to America, that the Democrats want to dismantle this nation. This proves it. There is a different way to go forward to rebuild, restore, and renew America.
Yes, and let me just say before you go, the CIA director, Gina Haspel, apparently has been blocking declassification. Many sources have told me that she does not want the spotlight on the CIA. What can you tell us about that? Because as I understand it, this is only a small portion of what John Radcliffe wanted to declassify. There's more. Is there more coming?
Well, there should be more coming. You know, the person who doesn't want this to come out is probably Hillary Clinton and Adam Schiff. Because what have they taken this America through? We're finding now Hillary Clinton's campaign created this. Adam Schiff propelled it, even though underlying facts proved that the president knew about it, Obama, that CIA knew about it, and the FBI know about it, and they withheld that information from the House and the Senate. Nobody in Congress has ever seen this information. This is the biggest news because of everything that's going on that the public has not seen yet, and this should drive every member of Congress to go get the underlying information that John Radcliffe had just made transparent to the world.
And by the way, it should outrage every American because our rights and liberties have been trampled on. Congressman, we're going to keep following it as we have been from day one. Thanks so much for joining us and for shining a spotlight on what we learned this week. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Maria, and I'm looking forward to your new book.
Thank you so much. The Cost, Trump, China, and American Revival will be out in 3 weeks. Congressman Kevin McCarthy, it is great to see you this morning. Coming up, Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton with reaction to 3 of his Senate colleagues testing positive for COVID-19 since Friday. Welcome back. Breaking news this morning that the U.S. Senate will stop legislating for 2 weeks after a third GOP lawmaker tested positive for coronavirus over the weekend. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who made the announcement yesterday, said he does not expect it to impact the already tight timeline to confirm Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett before Election Day. Those headlines are scheduled to begin. Those hearings, rather, are scheduled to begin on October 12th. And joining me right now is Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton. He sits on the Senate Intel, Banking, and Armed Services Committee. Senator, it's good to have you this morning. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, good morning, Maria. It's good to be on with you.
How are you doing this morning? Your colleagues have tested positive, and it looks like it was that Amy Coney Barrett gathering at the White House to introduce her to lawmakers that really was the place where so many people were exposed. What can you tell us?
Yeah, Maria, thanks for the question. I'm doing fine. You know, I extend my deepest wishes to the President and the First Lady and every American who's been affected by this virus to get well very quickly. I've been in contact with my colleagues who are either tested positive or who have been exposed to someone who tested positive. And to my knowledge, as of last night, everyone remains either asymptomatic or has mild symptoms that hasn't required hospitalization. What I can say is that everyone is eager to be at work when they need to be at work. They're on the Judiciary Committee a week from tomorrow, either in person or virtually, to have the confirmation hearings for Judge Barrett and then to have the vote on Judge Barrett this month. The President has nominated an outstanding jurist to be on the Supreme Court. I visited with her this week. It only confirmed my high opinion of her. I suspect that's going to be the case of the American people when they see Judge Barrett or confirmation hearing starting a week from tomorrow, and none of this should have any impact on the schedule of the Senate, either the Judiciary Committee or the Senate as a whole.
Yeah, I want to just point out that we showed video of the event with Amy Coney Barrett. Not everybody at the event has contracted COVID-19, obviously, but 3 senators have, and that's why I mentioned that event. But tell me about the proceedings. You say you are confident that you will be able to, in fact, have the nomination hearings for Judge Barrett. You think this will not impact the schedule or the agenda, sir?
No doubt about it, Maria. Several of the senators who are in isolation right now would come out of isolation before those hearings begin. But the Senate Judiciary Committee has also conducted 20 hearings this year that have either been in part or in whole virtual. Many Senate Democrats who are now saying we couldn't possibly do a virtual hearing were demanding throughout this year, going back to March, that all committees be conducted over Zoom or WebEx or some other kind of virtual hearing. So the hearing is going to go forward, no doubt in my mind, starting a week from tomorrow, Maria. And then on the Senate floor later this month, first off, I think every senator who's currently tested positive or is in isolation will be back to work under normal conditions, as other senators have been as well, like Rand Paul or Tim Kaine. But if that's not the case, Maria, there is a long and venerable tradition of ill or medically infirm senators being wheeled in to cast critical votes on the Senate floor. Most recently, Robert Byrd in 2009 repeatedly rolled in a wheelchair just months before his death to vote for Obamacare. So I'm confident that every senator will be in attendance when his or her vote is needed.
So what are you expecting from these hearings? We know how contentious the hearing was for Brett Kavanaugh, particularly Kamala Harris, when she was questioning him. What are you expecting from vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris?
Well, Kamala Harris in the hearings with Brett Kavanaugh revealed just what a terrible politician she is, just as she did last year when she lit $100 million of her donors' money on fire without even making it to the starting line for the Iowa caucuses. In the hearings with Brett Kavanaugh, she repeatedly insinuated that there was some kind of nefarious connection between him and a law firm and Russian agents without any evidence, and then dropped it without ever following it up. In another hearing for a Catholic judge who was a member of the Knights of Columbus, she attacked him for belonging to that Catholic social organization, criticizing him as if his faith impacted the way he would rule, and he couldn't overcome that. So I expect she'll launch the same kind of attacks that she did in the past, just like her fellow senator from California, Dianne Feinstein, attacked Amy Coney Barrett, saying the dogma lives loudly within you. Now, when I spoke with Judge Barrett, I said I regretted these attacks in the past, but unfortunately, I thought more of them were going to come in the future. I mean, just last weekend, you had some Democratic voices attacking her for adopting 2 Haitian children on social media. I'm afraid we're going to see more of that. We ought not to see it, but that's probably what the Democrats have up their sleeves.
Well, I mean, why are they so upset about this? They don't want the president to name another Supreme Court justice.
Well, that's the bottom line, Maria. You know, it's like why Joe Biden won't reveal his potential Supreme Court nominees, putting out a list the way Donald Trump does, because it would expose the radical left-wing agenda of the Democrats. Any judge that Joe Biden nominates would impose his views on the American people, taking critical questions away from them, not protecting their Second Amendment rights, or in many cases, their First Amendment rights. That's what the Democrats want from the courts to achieve by litigation, what they can't achieve by legislation.
All right, Senator, let's take a short break. When we come back, I want to get your take on Chinese state media and the reaction to the president's coronavirus diagnosis, what it says about their global ambitions. We're talking with Senator Tom Cotton this morning. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Beijing has already chosen sides in the 2020 election, with the Communist Party backing the Communist Party-backed Global Times endorsing Joe Biden last month, calling him, quote, smoother to deal with than President Trump. Now they are mocking the president's positive coronavirus test, writing in this since deleted tweet that he, quote, paid the price for his gamble to play down COVID-19. From the Global Times, Senator, your reaction.
It sounds like foreign election interference, Maria, with the Chinese Communist Party mouthpiece endorsing Joe Biden. Of course, there's a reason why they endorsed Joe Biden, because Joe Biden's record on China is terrible. He shipped our factories and our manufacturing jobs to China. He stood idly by while China stole our intellectual property and militarized its islands in the South China Sea and spread its communist tentacles of influence through our universities and Hollywood studios and major news organizations. Their mockery of President Trump, though, calls to mind what I've said since early January, when I was the first person in Washington sounding the alarm about this virus, which I've said from the beginning is serious and highly contagious, that there is one party and one party only that is responsible for all the Americans who have been affected by this virus, to include President Trump, those who have lost a job or fallen ill or even lost a loved one. And the responsible party is the Chinese Communist Party for unleashing this plague on the world and lying about it from the beginning, as they still lie about it today.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're not hearing the same, upset from the critics of President Trump, even from your Democrat colleagues. They just refuse to call out China and instead have plenty to say that's wrong with President Trump.
Well, I mean, look, Maria, back in late December, about a week or so after I'd called for a travel ban from China, and I'd consulted with the president about it, and he made the decisive announcement that he would shut down travel. What did Joe Biden say? Joe Biden said this is just another example of Donald Trump's hysteria and fear-mongering and xenophobia. If Joe Biden had been president in January and February, we would have still had tens of thousands of people landing in this country from mainland China while the virus was running rampant through mainland China for weeks. That would have meant the impact of the pandemic here would have been much greater, much earlier than it was. It's just another example of how Joe Biden has always been soft on China. And if he's elected president, we'll surrender all of the gains we've made over the last 4 years standing up to China finally.
Well, it's, of course, President Trump is the first leader to really poke back on China's behavior, in particular stealing intellectual property for so long from this country. What's your take on what they're stealing now? You were not only the first to call out China and call out the seriousness of this disease, but you also were among the first. You were the first on this program to say they were stealing our research on COVID-19 as we speak. Is that still going on? How do you stop it?
Well, yeah, Maria, the Chinese Communist Party continues to try to steal everything that's not bolted down to the floor. And after they've gotten all that, they'll bring bolt cutters back and try to take the rest of the stuff, too. I mean, look, in Arkansas, they've bribed a university professor for esoteric but essential engineering techniques that have military applications and stolen rice genomes, as you said. There's evidence the intelligence community has made public its concern about the threats that the Chinese Communist Party would be stealing research related to coronavirus vaccines. They continue their campaign of industrial and commercial and military espionage. We finally have a president that is taking it seriously and imposing cost on them. I'm afraid that we'll backslide if Joe Biden is elected president.
All right, we will leave it there. Tom Cotton, it's good to see you this morning, Senator. Thanks so much. Senator Tom Cotton joining us. We're going to continue talking about intelligence this morning. Straight ahead, Congressman Devin Nunes is here with brand new details on the origins of the Russian collusion hoax that he says proved the plot to take down President Trump was far worse than he ever thought. He was among those briefed by DNI.
This investigation of the president was corrupt. The FBI and the Department of Justice were politicized and weaponized. And in my opinion, there are only two possibilities: that you were deliberately corrupt or woefully incompetent. And I don't believe you were incompetent. This has done severe damage to the professionals and the honorable men and women at the FBI, because law enforcement should not be used as a political weapon. And that is the legacy you've left.
That was Texas Senator Ted Cruz grilling former FBI Director Jim Comey on Wednesday about his leadership overseeing the Crossfire hurricane probe. Comey, who oversaw the Bureau during the 2016 election up through the presidential transition period, told the Senate he did not know the source of the Steele dossier and that he did not recall anyone ever using the Logan Act against General Michael Flynn. Devin Nunes is the ranking member on the House Intel Committee. He is the author of the new book, Countdown to Socialism. Congressman Nunes, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Good morning.
So first, evaluate the Jim Comey testimony that we saw in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee this past week.
Well, you know, on certain days, James Comey has an intelligence level higher than Einstein. He seems to know everything. He takes immaculate notes. He even takes those classified notes home and shares them with a lawyer. Somehow those notes end up in the New York Times. But then other times, like you would think when you've actually opened an investigation into the Trump campaign in Russia, he seems to have amnesia. He's forgotten everything. And look, and I'll just make this point. We asked him specifically, and all the other dirty cops at DOJ and FBI and the intelligence agencies in January of early 2017, where did this dirt come from? none of them seem to know the answer. And you know what, Maria? Every damn person in that room knew the answer except for the Republicans. That's the truth.
Unbelievable. Well, we want to talk more about this. I want to point out this op-ed that Kim Strassel from the Wall Street Journal wrote last week, and it's called The James Comey Election. And in it, she writes, Mr. Comey personifies what enrages Americans after they have gone through 3.5 years of this collusion narrative. She says this was the crew that in 2016, based on the thinnest of tips, launched a counterintelligence investigation into a presidential campaign complete with secret surveillance warrants and informants. She goes on to say this all took place in Barack Obama and Joe Biden's Washington. Those 8 years also featured plenty of other swamp monsters. Don't underestimate the number of Americans who fear a return to that world. Lois Lerner harassing conservative nonprofits, supervisors at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives losing guns in Fast and Furious, the EPA minions who burned companies with ever-changing rules, and the list goes on. This is why she's calling this the James Comey election. Will the American people understand what took place under Joe Biden and Barack Obama's watch and this plan to take down a candidate and then a sitting president, Congressman?
Well, look, Maria, this may sound a little self-serving, but the reason I wrote Countdown to Socialism is exactly for this reason, that people need to understand the consequences of this election. We are going to go back to what we've been living through, this nightmare. For me, it's been 4 years. You have to remember, I was first briefed on this in September, that the Russians were doing something nefarious, but was never given any information. And now what we find out from the briefings we've recently had, and I know you asked Leader McCarthy this, this is a real problem, that these documents that clearly our government had, the legislative branch of government never received these. Remember what I said earlier about that January meeting? Hey, who the hell paid for this? And remember, it was the work that we did, the House Republicans did. We had to fight through subpoenas. We had to prove that it was the Clinton campaign and the DNC that had paid for the dirty dossier and this dirty information. Remember all of that happened? We should have been, they knew about this 4 years ago when myself and Speaker at the time, Paul Ryan, were briefed, and they hid this from us, and they continued to hide it all the way until we uncovered it. But I will tell you, the documents that are underlying that we now have seen, I've only seen a few of those. They're definitely smoking guns. That information definitely needs to be made available to the American public. And from what I understand, there's even more underlying evidence that backs up what Director Ratcliffe put out. And just think how long it took for us to figure out this information. I know it's mind-boggling. This has been a very difficult task for us to get to the bottom of, because you have corrupt officials. And I think that's the point here. Are you going to go back and elect somebody like Biden, who just the other night, Maria, had the audacity to go after President Trump once again for what? That Putin, I think he said he had Putin wrapped around his finger. And then he didn't answer the question of why did his son get $3.5 million from a Russian oligarch with ties to Putin? If Ivanka Trump had been bought a Big Mac in the Red Square by a Russian oligarch, they would have locked her up and they would have said, this is evidence of collusion. Here you have the media, which is the propaganda arm of the Democratic Party, ignoring all of this for the last 4 years. And now you have on a debate stage, why did your son get paid $3.5 million from a Russian oligarch? So here they've been blaming Republicans have something to do with Russia, when the whole damn time they have something to do with Russia. I think what they think is that it's okay for them to take all this money and grift, but they'll just take and accuse Republicans of doing it to cover up their tracks. And that's basically what we knew about this the whole time. There was plenty of circumstantial evidence to know this, Maria, that the Clinton campaign had created all of this because they knew that 33,000 emails were out there somewhere. They knew that Jason Chaffetz and House Republicans were trying to find those emails. So what did they do? They created a sick fantasy. Okay, this was the Clinton campaign. I want you to remember this. The Clinton campaign created this sick fantasy. Then they went out and hired avatars to do it. So they hired a former British spy named Steele who did the Steele dossiers. Then they hired this suspected Russian spy okay, so that they could give it a veneer of being a Russian. So imagine that. Now you have the Democrats hiring Russian spies, getting $3.5 million from Moscow, and nobody in the media seems to give a damn about it. And so I think what Leader McCarthy said is exactly right. Every Republican, senator, and member of Congress should be saying, this is over. We want every damn bit of evidence that every intelligence agency has, or it's maybe time to shut those agencies down. Because at the end of the day, our liberties are more important than anything else we have in this country, and they have been stampeded over by these dirty cops and the Democratic Party and the media who fails to report on it.
Yeah, this is absolutely shameful that this report last week that DNI Ratcliffe declassified got no coverage from the mainstream media. No coverage. What a disgrace that our liberties and rights have been trampled over because of one political campaign coming up with an idea to stir up a fantasy, stir up a scandal around the other political campaign. And the FBI went right along with it and weaponized our intelligence agencies to go against Donald Trump. So what else can you tell us about this? You were briefed by DNI Ratcliffe, part of the Gang of Eight, a small group of 8 congressmen who are privy to intelligence out of the executive branch. What can you tell us? Is there more coming? And by the way, you just said many times you've never seen this. When this story first came out last week, that is the first thing that the media said. This was out and it was debunked. What you're saying is you've never seen this.
Yeah. Well, look, remember, the media is essentially the Democratic National Committee. So they're putting out the same propaganda to cover up the tracks because the media was involved in this the whole time. Remember what I was saying, that we were looking for all this information because we suspected, and look, it was really, I got to credit Lee Smith, the investigative journalist who actually wrote about this in his book. He actually discovered, just by going through and looking at what the media was saying, looking at what the campaign was saying, and the timing of it all, and then he actually got his hands on what were, these are really unknown, only Lee Smith has these, the proto-dossiers. So these were the early dossiers, and I would encourage everybody to go back and look at the early dossiers before you got to the Steele dossiers. So essentially what you had is you had these sick fantasies that were in these proto-dossiers that then they hired the Russian spy and the British spy to make it look like it was real, to cover up what the Clinton campaign was doing. And so now there's a bunch of underlying evidence that I've only seen a little bit of this week. I think there's a lot more of it. I will also say this, if you ask of other information that I think we need to see. We need to see, we had this FBI agent, 302 came out about his recollection of everything that had happened. So the Russian spy that the Democrats hired that actually worked for a left-wing think tank called the Brookings Institute, we need to see, he was interviewed 3 times. And in fact, he was even given, supposedly he was given a get out of jail free card because he testified. Now, when he testified, he said, I don't have anything. At least that's what we're being told by Horowitz and others. The American public needs to see the 3 reports that we know about, at least, from the Democrats' Russian spy that they hired. So that's additional documents that we need to see. And then just on a, on another note, you see that that McCabe isn't going to testify this week because he's fearful for his safety. He's supposed to testify before the Senate. This is new evidence too. I'm not familiar with COVID transmitting over the internet, but it seems the dirty cops at the FBI, they can get COVID over the internet now. It's a shame that these guys now are not going to testify before the Senate.
So Andrew McCabe is saying he's not going to testify on virtually because of COVID?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. I mean, these guys are such good agents.
Yeah.
They've they know more than medical doctors know. He doesn't want to get COVID over Zoom or Skype. I mean, it's a joke. I'm not joking, but it's ridiculous.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, I understand. I understand what you're saying. It's absolutely unbelievable. And for 4 years, you came on my show, this program, and you laid it all out. And I know that you've been asking, demanding documents. Welcome back. We just heard from Congressman Devin Nunes, and he said the plot to take down President Donald Trump was far more sinister than anybody ever expected. My sources tell me that DNI Ratcliffe declassified only a small portion of the intelligence which implicates Hillary Clinton. There is more. Even so, without Ratcliffe and his predecessor, Rick Grinnell, the American public would never have known about any of it. As acting director of national intelligence, Grinnell and now Ratcliffe view more raw intelligence than anyone in the country, except for the president. Rick Grinnell also served as the U.S. ambassador to Germany. He joins me right now. Good morning, Rick. Great to have you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us. And you really got the ball rolling, starting to declassify these important documents. Can you react to what you just heard from Devin Nunes?
Yeah, first of all, let me start, Maria, by really thanking you. You've been on this story. This is something that the American people need to know the truth on. Transparency is not political, and anyone who's trying to pretend that bringing the facts out and bringing the documents out is somehow nefarious or political is just dead wrong. We have had a scandal developing, and the scandal has developed largely because politicians have allowed individuals to hide information, to create a false narrative on one side. What Devin was saying, I think, is very real. What we heard from James Comey this week was really shocking, because James Comey is blaming lower-level, mid-level career intelligence officials for this whole debacle. He's pleading that he didn't know anything about it and they did it. And so this is the first moment where he's throwing the intelligence community officials, career officials, under the bus.
So he's throwing them under the bus by saying he didn't know anything. Was this not the most important investigation the FBI has ever conducted into a sitting president? And he says he didn't know. If he didn't know, why was this investigation happening out of headquarters, right? Wouldn't an investigation be happening in the field office? Instead, it was right there under his watch. How is it possible that he didn't know?
Oh, I think it's not possible at all. He was a leader who knew every detail, took copious notes, and he's now just pretending that he didn't know. But the most important part is he's blaming mid-level career officials. Let me be clear to intelligence officials, career individuals that I've worked with who are incredible people, who have been shocked at what has happened, that leadership has hid those voices that were early on saying this is Russian propaganda, we shouldn't go with it. But the leadership, James Comey and others in the leadership, decided to hide those warnings from career officials, and now he's blaming career officials. Let me just say, these career intelligence officials who largely live in the D.C. area are represented mostly by Senator Warner, who sits on the Intelligence Committee, who is a leader on the Intelligence Committee. And Senator Warner has been completely silent on protecting those individuals who did the right thing early on by creating warnings saying this is Russian propaganda. Senator Warner is protecting James Comey. If you live in Virginia, this is an outrage that you are not being represented by a senator who has your interests. Because when I saw James Comey throw the intelligence community officials under the bus, that's outrageous, should not be allowed to happen.
So I want to ask that about Mark Warner. I also want to ask you about Gina Haspel. Gina Haspel does not want any more declassifications coming out. Why? What is going to happen to the CIA head next? We're going to take a break. Then when we come back, we'll talk about the media. I'm back with former acting DNI Rick Grinnell. And Rick, we were just talking about this declassification, this bombshell declassified document, which happened last week. You saw that Gina Haspel has been reluctant to release information about what took place in 2016. That's the head of the CIA. Is that what you've experienced as well, and why?
Look, Maria, I don't think it's helpful to publicly criticize the heads of intelligence agencies, especially as the former acting director. I've worked very closely with all of them. But let me just say this, that I think it's incredibly important that we all lean forward on releasing documents. If the documents are not showing specific sources or methods in how we got those pieces of information and intelligence, I think that this scandal is big enough that we need to lean forward and declassify and release the information, especially when we have U.S. senators asking for this information. I think it's incredibly important if we want to have intelligence agencies that the American public has faith in. And it's clear that this past several years, our intelligence agencies and other agencies of the U.S. government were weaponized against their political enemies. And this is a scandal that people need to pay attention to. And this is also, let me just say this, this is what happens when the insiders maintain control over all of the information. And this is why I believe that President Trump, as the outsider, is being viciously attacked, because he's getting close to really changing the way that Washington works, and they do not want the rules changed, which is why they've gone back to the guy that they can trust as the nominee. The 47 years of Joe Biden, they know exactly what he's going to do and what rules he'll play by.
Well, that's right. People do not want to lose their grip on power. Rick, I wanted to ask you about the LGBTQ community and why you have said such favorable things about the president. We will talk about that next time.